ecclesia, for example, at the time of the Peloponnesian War, constantly switched views and switched sides. So he had that as his criticism there. And he said Rome escapes that precisely because there are mini-bodies that can check and balance one another. And that's an essential part of government. Now, Polybius's ideal, this Republican ideal as it quickly became known, of course was rediscovered in medieval Europe. It was rediscovered, for example, in the northern Italian city-states. Machiavelli, although he's best known now for The Prince, wrote a book that was much more important in many ways, the discourses on Livy's histories. Livy, the historian who had bought Polybius' story about republicanism. Machiavelli becomes a great spokesman for, in this book, for this new republicanism, this Renaissance republicanism. And Machiavelli's ideas and the ideas of republicanism in general, they spread throughout Europe very rapidly. One of the first countries, and this isn't much known, that becomes deeply republican is Poland. The Republic of the Nobles in Poland in the 17th century is probably the model country, actually, in Europe in that very difficult period of religious wars. It was the one country, for example, that did not experience the great strife of Protestant versus Catholicism and did not go over to just one, so to speak, absolute imposition of one religion. So Poland is one example, the Polish Republic of the Nobles. Another is the Dutch Republic. And another, of course, is the English Republic, which is brought in with the Civil War of the 17th century in the 1640s. It goes under as the king returns, but it really comes again in a second phase after James II of England is driven into exile and Parliament chooses its own monarch. It chooses William and Mary, as you know, in 1688. And then in the 1700s, the 18th century, England becomes more and more like the sort of republic that Polybius would have recognized. Actually, Montesquieu, who came to England in the way that Polybius came to Rome, and just as Polybius told the Romans they were wonderful and they had a wonderful constitution, that's exactly what Montesquieu told the British, the English. And as the Romans loved Polybius for it, so the English loved Montesquieu for it. What Montesquieu said was that England was a republic hidden in the form of a monarchy. These republican ideas in England and Britain of the period of the 18th century, they spread, of course, to England's colonies in America. And they're the very ideas that the American colonists use against the home country in claiming their own freedom and independence. So that first American Revolution is very much a revolution in the spirit of Roman or neo-Roman republicanism. You know, the main figures in the American Revolution, for example, they all called themselves by Roman names. For example, they wrote anonymously under the name Cato, one of the great political figures of Republican Rome, and under the name Publius. Now, okay, I've talked enough about the general history. We get Rome, we get the Renaissance, we get Poland, Holland, England, America, the spread of these ideas. But what are the ideas? I've given you some idea, but let me boil them down to just two crucial ideas that mark what republicanism is. The first is an idea of freedom, a specific conception of what it is to be free. And the other is a conception of what form the state government has to take if it is to promote people's freedom in that sense. So what is the ideal of freedom? Well, the Romans had a word called dominatio, dominación in Spanish, domination in English. And dominatio, in the Latin Roman usage, it meant mastery, it meant lordship. You suffered dominatio so far as you had a dominus, a lord, a master in your life. They thought if you had a master, then you weren't free. Now, your master might be very kind to you. In fact, your master might give you a lot of free rein, as we say. You know, like a horse is given free rein, so a master might give you free rein. But free rein was not freedom for the Romans. A horse that is given free rein by the person in the saddle, the rider, is not thereby free because there's somebody in the saddle. He's being ridden by someone, controlled by someone. And the Romans argued that if you had a master, even if he gave you free rein, he was still in the saddle, and he made you unfree. So even if he let you do what you wish, within limits, maybe even without limits, because he could always blow the whistle, pull the reins back, you were always his subject and you were not free. That's a very rich notion of freedom, notice, because it means that you can, as it were, have free rein, be allowed to do all sorts of things by your husband if you're a woman, by your employer if you're a servant in the household in Rome. But so long as you have that master in your life, you're not a liber, you don't have libertas, you're not free. So it demands that the elimination of mastery or domination in order to be free. Now the Romans, of course, thought that only very few people could be free. Only men, for example, and only men basically who were of a certain property qualification. I mean, they were pretty good, actually. The poor were often citizens, and to be a citizen was to be free in their view. Anyhow, that's the notion of freedom that comes down in the Republican tradition. It means non-subjection, non-subordination, non-domination. It's not enough that you're not interfered with. The nice master, the gentle master, the dominus bonus, the good master, the good lord, he may not actually interfere. He may say, do as you wish. But the absence of interference doesn't make you free, because there's still domination, there's still mastery, there's still